The cold hum of the lab's fluorescent lights filled the space, vibrating against the still air. Dr. Kieran Voss sat hunched over a series of holographic screens, fingers tracing the intricate patterns of alien genomes with the precision of a surgeon. His brow furrowed in concentration, eyes narrowing at the data that flowed in front of him like an endless tide. The soft clink of his coffee cup against the steel counter was the only other sound, the liquid inside long since gone cold. He didn't notice. Outside the lab, Earth remained blissfully ignorant. While other worlds burned under the weight of the virus, humanity continued its day-to-day life. To Kieran, the virus was nothing but a distant concern, an anomaly in the data streams, just another calamity that wouldn't touch Earth. After all, humanity had faced worse: wars, famine, climate disasters. Humans adapted. The virus would pass, just like everything else. But that was before the transmission came in. "Dr. Voss, you need to see this," came the voice from the intercom, cutting through the silence like a knife. Kieran's fingers froze on the keyboard as he heard the urgency in the voice of Serafina Valen, the diplomat from the Galactic Council. He sighed, closing his eyes for a brief moment as if to summon his patience. He walked over to the monitor where Serafina's holographic form flickered into life, her sharp features painted with worry, her dark eyes locked with his, a silent request for his attention. She had been a constant presence in his life these past few weeks, and though they rarely saw eye to eye, Kieran couldn't deny her expertise in the delicate dance of galactic diplomacy. "The virus," she began, her voice strained. "It's here." Kieran's stomach churned. His fingers brushed against his chin, the sound of his nails against stubble mingling with the heavy silence that followed. "What do you mean, here?" His words felt distant, as if he were trying to convince himself this wasn't happening. Serafina's lips tightened. "It's on Earth, Kieran. But it's not spreading. Not like it is everywhere else. The rest of the galaxy is in chaos. And humanity? You're immune." He blinked, disbelief washing over him. "Immune? Are you suggesting Earth is untouched by this plague?" His voice carried a hint of mockery, as if the whole idea were too absurd. She nodded solemnly. "I've seen the reports. Earth's immune system isn't just resistant. You're completely unaffected. We don't understand how, but we need answers. We need you." For the first time in days, Kieran's thoughts snapped into focus. His heart beat a little faster. He stared at the screen, trying to process the weight of what she'd just said. The implications were enormous. "But that doesn't make sense. The virus isn't supposed to be selective. It targets every advanced civilization it encounters. And we're still a fledgling species." The silence between them stretched thick with tension. The outside world, alien ships patrolling the skies, cities engulfed in flames, millions dying in the wake of the pandemic, seemed a distant reality now, as if the virus could not touch Earth's fragile bubble. Serafina's hologram flickered, and the image of her shifted, as if the gravity of the situation was pressing against her. "We thought you might have an explanation. Maybe your genetics hold the answer. You're humanity's last hope, Kieran." The words hit him like a punch to the gut, knocking the breath from his lungs. His pulse quickened, but it wasn't just fear that raced through him. No, this was something darker, a weight settling deep within his chest, a pressure that would change everything. "How much time do we have?" Kieran asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging in his veins. Serafina paused, her eyes hardening. "Not much. Galactic leaders are already sending fleets to Earth, desperate for a solution. They're willing to do anything. We need to act fast. They don't trust humans, Kieran, and if we fail to provide them with answers, I fear they won't hesitate to force a solution." The cold, metallic scent of the lab seemed to grow stronger as he processed her words. The hum of the machines around him, once a comforting presence, now felt suffocating. He turned away from Serafina, pacing in front of the glowing screens, his mind spinning with possibilities. How could he possibly be the one to solve this? A biochemist who had never been more than a background player in the galaxy's grand political theater. But then, He thought of the data on the virus. He thought of the way it spread, how it mutated so swiftly that no civilization had managed to contain it, except Earth. Kieran's fingers hovered over the holographic display, his mind racing. I need more data. I'll need a sample of the virus. Something pure, no contamination, and I need access to the research done by the galactic scientists. I won't be able to do this alone. Serafina's image shimmered, then solidified once more. I'll arrange it, but you'll need to hurry. The Council is already looking to Earth for answers, and there's another problem. She hesitated, as if unsure of how much to reveal. There's a faction within the Council that might not want you to succeed. They might see your immunity as a threat. Isn't it always the way? Kieran muttered bitterly. He didn't need to be told. He could feel the weight of the politics pressing down on him, every move a potential step toward war. He turned back to face the screens, his gaze sharpening with a new sense of resolve. Then we'll give them a reason to believe in humanity's power. The words hung in the air, heavy with significance. Kieran knew he was about to be thrust into a galaxy-spanning crisis, a crisis that would not only test his scientific prowess, but would force him to confront the darkest parts of himself. The planet was unprepared, the universe uncertain, and the stakes higher than ever. Outside the lab, the sky darkened, a cold wind howling through the empty streets. Kieran's breath fogged up the glass in front of him as he gazed out into the growing storm. A storm that wasn't just metaphorical. We'll need a plan, he muttered to himself, the weight of the responsibility settling deeper in his bones. He wasn't just working to save Earth anymore. This was about the fate of the galaxy. As he turned back to the display, the first wave of ships, alien ships, appeared on the horizon, their dark silhouettes casting long shadows over the horizon. Humanity's nightmare had only just begun. The hum of the lab was drowned out by the rising urgency in Kieran's mind. He stared at the flickering screen, watching the alien ship silhouettes grow larger by the second. His pulse thrummed in his ears, each beat carrying the weight of the galaxy's expectations. Earth, the last untouched planet, was now the focal point of a war that had barely begun. A war over a virus that no one fully understood. Kieran's fingers trembled as they hovered above the touchpad. This was his moment. His chance to uncover the key that could save humanity, or damn it. He could feel the cool, sterile air around him pressing against his skin, mixing with the burning tension in his chest. The walls of the lab seemed to shrink, and the overhead lights flickered in sync with his erratic thoughts. He stood there for a long moment, the quiet of the room pressing against his eardrums, until a chime broke the silence. Serafina's hologram materialized in front of him, her usual poise now replaced by a visible edge of concern. Her sharp features were set in a hard line, her dark eyes reflecting a deeper anxiety than Kieran had ever seen before. "The fleet's here," she said, her voice steady but tinged with a bite of desperation. "And they're not here for pleasantries." Kieran took a slow breath, pushing away the rising tide of dread. "We need to work fast. I've requested a sample of the virus from the nearest station, but I'll need more than that. We need genetic data, something that can explain why Earth is immune." Serafina nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I'll get you everything you need, but we both know we're not the only ones trying to crack this mystery. The Council won't wait for us to find the answer." Kieran's eyes narrowed. "I'm not waiting either." His voice was low, a promise he would later understand the cost of. He turned back to the data streaming across his console, feeling his thoughts align into something cold, logical. He would need to isolate the key markers in the human genome, something that had allowed them to resist the virus while every other species succumbed. That, he thought, was the puzzle piece he had to find. The lab door slid open with a soft hiss, and a figure stepped inside, cutting through the tension like a knife. It was Dr. Myra Malin, a colleague and friend, though Kieran didn't always feel the camaraderie. Her eyes were wide, and her breath was heavy, as if she had been running. "Kieran," she gasped, her voice cracking with urgency. "It's happening. The virus is mutating." His stomach sank, a heavy, nauseating feeling washing over him. "Mutating? What do you mean?" "Something's wrong. The data from the outer colonies, it's It's evolving faster than we thought. Myra's hand shook as she placed a tablet on the counter, the holographic images flickering to life. The virus's mutation was visible in real time. Genetic strands twisting, changing, as if the virus itself were learning, adapting, outpacing them. Kieran's breath hitched. It's accelerating. We're not just dealing with a disease anymore. We're dealing with an engineered weapon. Serafina's voice was a distant whisper in his mind. You were right, Kieran, it's not natural. This virus has been designed to evolve. The cold air felt like it was pressing in on him, tightening around his chest. The walls of the lab seemed to collapse in on themselves as Kieran stared at the shifting genetic strands. His eyes ached with the effort of keeping them trained on the screen. He could feel his pulse racing beneath his skin, each beat louder, more insistent. This wasn't just about finding a cure anymore. This was about survival. Do you see it? Myra's voice cut through his thoughts. The virus is adapting to human immunity. It's as if it's trying to break through. Serafina's words echoed in his mind again. You're humanity's last hope, Kieran. Are we certain humanity's immunity isn't part of the plan? Kieran muttered, his mind now racing. It didn't make sense. The virus had never targeted humans before. Not like this. If Earth's immunity wasn't some random stroke of luck, then... Yes, it's as if they designed it to make humans the perfect vector, Myra replied, her face pale, eyes wide. But if that's true, why hasn't Earth been hit harder? Kieran ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts spinning into dark territories. The realization hit him like a physical blow. They were part of something much larger. This virus wasn't just an attack, it was the opening move in a much deeper game. The virus wasn't just about wiping out civilizations. It was about creating a new order. And Earth? Earth was the key. Kieran clenched his fists, his fingers digging into his palms, grounding himself against the rising panic. We need to find out who's behind this. We need to understand why we're immune, and we need to do it quickly, before it spreads beyond our control. Myra nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. And if we can't? What then? The question hung in the air like a lead weight. Kieran didn't answer at first. He couldn't. He wasn't sure what would happen if they failed. The galaxy was depending on him, on humanity, and yet, in the pit of his stomach, a dark seed of doubt began to grow. Was he enough? Was humanity enough? The door opened again, but this time it wasn't Serafina. It was a figure draped in dark clothing, stepping out of the shadows with a predator's grace. Kieran's heart skipped a beat as the man's presence filled the room. It was Counselor Thalos, a high-ranking diplomat whose face always carried the weight of authority. His voice was a low growl, steeped in warning. You have no time left, Doctor. Voss, the galaxy wants answers. Serafina entered behind him, her face unreadable. The tension in her eyes, however, betrayed her concern. She didn't say a word, but the quiet urgency in her posture spoke volumes. She had warned Kieran of the consequences, but he hadn't fully grasped the pressure. I'm doing everything I can, Kieran said, his voice sharper than he intended. He felt his heart thud painfully against his ribcage. He couldn't let them see the fear. Thalos eyed him coldly. You've barely begun. The Council demands results. Now. Kieran turned back to the console, his fingers trembling as he keyed in a sequence of commands. The ship that hovered in the distance, like a vulture circling its prey, was not just a symbol of the crisis. It was a deadline ticking down relentlessly. We need the genetic data, Kieran said, his voice tight. We need to understand how the virus is manipulating Earth's immunity, and we need to find out who engineered it before we're caught in a war we can't escape. Serafina's eyes softened for just a moment, but the weight of their mission quickly brought her back to the reality of the situation. We don't have much time, Kieran, she said, her tone firm. The walls of the lab seemed to close in, the air thick with the knowledge that every second counted. The future of humanity and the galaxy hung in the balance. The cold scent of metal mixed with the faint aroma of burnt coffee as Kieran pushed forward, knowing there would be no turning back. The mystery of the virus, of humanity's immunity, was unraveling, But would it be enough to save them all? The galaxy's fate was shifting, and Kieran knew, in the deepest parts of himself, that it was only just beginning. The tension in the lab was palpable, thick enough to choke on. Kieran's hands hovered over the holographic display, his mind racing faster than the data flowing across the screen. The alien virus was evolving again, but this time it was different. It was mutating in ways that didn't make sense, as if it were learning, adapting not just to humanity, but to the galaxy itself. Earth's immunity was no longer just a miracle. It was the spark that would ignite a firestorm. The quiet, sterile smell of the lab, metallic and slightly acrid, filled Kieran's nostrils as he stared at the latest set of genetic sequences, each one more incomprehensible than the last. Seraphina's voice broke through his concentration. "Kieran, we've got a problem." He turned toward her, his eyes dark with the weight of everything they were facing. She was standing near the door, her expression tight. A holographic projection of the galactic map floated between them, with dots marking incoming ships. Ships that weren't just heading toward Earth, they were heading for war. "Tell me," he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Seraphina took a slow breath, her gaze not meeting his. "The virus isn't just a biological weapon anymore, it's a political one. The Council, they're not just waiting for a cure. They want Earth under their control. They don't trust humanity with the cure. They see us as a threat." The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. His mind whirled. They had known the virus was dangerous. They had known the galaxy was teetering on the brink of chaos. But to hear that humanity, the last unscathed species, was now seen as a threat. It was a sobering, terrifying thought. "You mean they want to take our immunity from us?" Kieran muttered under his breath, the cold realization sinking in. "Exactly," Seraphina said, her voice tight. "And they're willing to do whatever it takes to get it." Kieran slammed his hand down on the console, frustration flooding his chest. "We don't have time for this. We need to get the data from the galactic stations, figure out what makes Earth immune, and we need to do it fast." Seraphina stepped forward, her usual composure faltering just slightly. "And what about the factions that are already on their way? The ones that want to take the cure by force?" "Kieran, Earth's isolation is over. We're no longer neutral in this war." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The war wasn't some far-off disaster anymore. It was already here, creeping in on all sides. Every second that passed without a solution meant more ships, more soldiers, more potential casualties. Kieran glanced back at the console. The data, as always, was incomplete. He wasn't sure how much time they had left, but he knew it wasn't much. The virus's mutations were accelerating. Somehow it was learning, evolving with every minute that passed. What if the galaxy's worst nightmare had already come true, and they had only just realized it? What if this virus was more than a weapon? It was a deliberate mechanism to reshape the galaxy. "Seraphina," Kieran said, his voice low, almost a whisper, "do you trust the Council? Any of them?" She didn't answer immediately, her gaze flicking to the hologram, but Kieran could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Trust is a luxury we can't afford, but right now we don't have much of a choice." He nodded grimly, the decision weighing heavily on his shoulders. "Then let's give them a reason to trust us. If we can unlock the full genome, find the key to immunity, maybe then we can negotiate. But I won't let them take Earth. I won't let them take what we've earned." Seraphina's eyes softened for a brief moment. There was something unspoken between them, a shared understanding of just how far this was going to go, and how little time they had to make their move. Before she could respond, the sharp buzz of an incoming communication cut through the tension in the room. Kieran glanced at the screen. It was an encrypted message from Counselor Thalos, the same diplomat who had warned him of the dangers of Earth's immunity. His face flickered onto the screen, his expression grim. "Dr. Voss," Thalos began, his voice clipped and formal. "The time for negotiations is over. You have no choice but to comply with the Council's demands. The fleets are mobilizing. Surrender your data on Earth's immunity, or we will take it by force." The words hung in the air, a brutal ultimatum. The cold realization that Kieran's worst fears were coming true hit him with a gut-wrenching force. The galaxy was not going to wait. It wasn't about saving lives anymore. It was about control. And Earth was the last piece of the puzzle. Kieran's mind raced. He knew that even if they handed over the data, the galaxy wouldn't simply back down. Humanity had become a pawn in a game that no one had prepared them for. But there was still one thing they could do. "Tell the Council," Kieran said through gritted teeth, "that if they want the cure, they'll have to come to Earth and take it from us." Thalos's image flickered, and for the first time, Kieran saw something like uncertainty in the diplomat's eyes, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by cold resolve. "You'll regret this, Doctor. Voss. The galaxy won't tolerate your defiance." The connection cut off with a sharp hiss, and the silence that followed felt heavier than ever. Kieran looked over at Serafina, her eyes dark with the same fear and determination he felt. "It's started," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kieran didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to the console, his mind working at breakneck speed. The virus, the fleet, the political games, it was all colliding at once. And the worst part? He didn't know who to trust. Every move he made felt like a gamble, a dangerous one with the galaxy's future at stake. "Get the data," Kieran said, his voice steel. "I'll prepare Earth's defenses. We need to be ready for whatever's coming." As Serafina nodded and left the room to mobilize, Kieran felt a strange stillness wash over him. The kind of stillness that comes before the storm. He could already hear the distant thrum of engines, the alien fleets nearing Earth's orbit. The door slid open behind him. He didn't turn around. "We'll be ready," Serafina's voice came, her tone firm despite the weight of the situation. "But we won't survive this without unity. Can we count on the other factions?" Kieran turned slowly, his mind calculating, a flicker of hope burning faintly in the dark corners of his thoughts. "We don't have the luxury of trust. We'll have to make our own allies and fight this war on our terms." The quiet hum of the lab was now drowned out by the increasing sound of ships preparing for battle, each second stretching into eternity. And as Kieran stared into the cold glow of the screens, he knew one thing. They had just crossed the point of no return. The war had begun, and humanity's role in it was more than just survival. It was about defining their place in the galaxy's future. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated through Kieran's bones as he paced the command center, the cold metal floor beneath his boots, a stark reminder that everything was about to change. The time for words had passed. The fleets were already in orbit, their shadows stretching across Earth's atmosphere. The galaxy's most powerful factions were poised, each one seeking the key that was now in humanity's hands. The virus, the weapon that had thrown the galaxy into chaos, was no longer just a plague. It was an opportunity, a power grab that would see Earth either destroyed or elevated to unimaginable heights. Kieran's mind raced, spinning with possibilities, calculating risks. Serafina's voice echoed in his ear, a steady presence as always. "The Council is demanding the data. They want to come to Earth within the next 12 hours. The message is clear. They're not interested in negotiations anymore." Kieran's grip tightened around the edge of the steel table, his knuckles white. "I know what they want. But we're not handing over our future. We need to turn the tables. We'll make them come to us, but we won't give them what they expect." Serafina's voice crackled through the communicator. "You're talking about a trap." "Not a trap," Kieran replied, his voice calm, calculating. "A strategy." His fingers danced over the holographic display in front of him, bringing up maps of Earth's military assets, along with schematics of the incoming ships. There were hundreds of them, alien warships, most far more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. But Kieran wasn't afraid of their technology. He was afraid of the way the galaxy's factions were beginning to see Earth, not as a struggling planet, but as a force to be reckoned with. The virus had turned them from a backwater world into a strategic asset. "We need to strike first," Kieran continued, his voice steady, but his eyes were sharp, reflecting the urgency of the situation. "We have one shot at this, and it won't come from firing blindly at them. We're going to use their desperation against them." Serafina's tone shifted, intrigued but wary. "You're suggesting we fight a war of diplomacy?" "Not just diplomacy," Kieran said, his gaze fixed on the glowing map. "We use their own paranoia against them. We'll make them think we've unlocked the full power of Earth's immunity, that we're not just resistant to the virus. We can weaponize it. If they think we have that kind of power, they'll come to the negotiating table on our terms." Serafina paused, and when she spoke again, there was a new sharpness in her voice. "That's a dangerous game, Kieran. You're asking us to bluff. No, worse, lie to the galaxy's most powerful factions." "It's not a lie," Kieran replied, his voice firm. "It's a calculated risk. If we show them the virus in a way they don't understand, something they can't control, they'll have no choice but to listen. We'll manipulate their fear, the fear of humanity's potential." Serafina was silent for a moment. Kieran could practically hear the wheels turning in her head, weighing the costs, the risks. She knew as well as he did that the moment they made this move, there would be no going back. One wrong step and Earth would be wiped from existence. "You're right," she finally said. "We've never been in this position before. But if we can control the narrative, maybe, just maybe, we'll have a chance to avoid total destruction. We'll need to move quickly." "Exactly," Kieran said, tapping in a command. "I'll start preparing the data. We'll need a false lead on the virus's capabilities. Make them believe we've unlocked a strain that's far more deadly. We'll make them think it's something they can't control. Then we'll use it to get them to negotiate." Serafina's holographic image flickered, then solidified once more. "You want us to plant the idea that we have a weapon that could decimate their entire fleets?" "Yes," Kieran confirmed, already shifting through scientific data. He didn't need to elaborate. He could see the plan unfolding in his mind, each step a calculated move. "We'll use the virus's rapid mutation as proof. The rest of the galaxy believes we're sitting on the edge of extinction, but they don't know the full potential of what Earth could become. They think they can control the virus, but they don't understand it. We'll let them think we have the upper hand." Serafina hesitated, then spoke, her voice colder than usual. "But if they believe it, they'll push harder. They'll demand Earth's submission, and their ships will land with one purpose: to take the cure or destroy us." Kieran smiled grimly. "That's when the real strategy comes in. We'll use their desperation against them. They'll send their best diplomats, their strongest generals, and that's when we'll make our move." The plan was simple in theory, but risky in execution. Kieran knew it wouldn't be easy to convince the galactic powers that Earth's immunity was more than just a fluke, but he had no choice. He couldn't wait for someone else to act. This was humanity's moment, and it was slipping away by the second. As Kieran worked, the sounds of distant engines roaring to life filled the background. Ships, fleet after fleet, readying themselves for an assault. The air in the command center seemed to grow heavier, thicker with the weight of the decision they were making. Outside, the sky had darkened, the first signs of the coming storm. Not a physical one, but a war, an intergalactic war. Kieran could feel it in his bones. It was coming. "All right," he said, his voice hardening with resolve. "It's time. We'll need to plant the seed of fear, let them think we've unlocked something they can't control. We'll set up the meeting on neutral ground, in space. No one can afford to make the first strike. And when they come to negotiate, we'll control the conversation. We'll make them believe they need us more than we need them." Serafina's voice came through clearly, her trust in Kieran now unshakable. "I'll arrange the meeting. You focus on preparing the virus data. We'll need to be ready for anything." As the hours passed, Kieran worked tirelessly, organizing the data, weaving the narrative he needed. The virus, its mutations, its potential, it had to seem like something they could not ignore. Humanity's future, its place in the galaxy hung on this deception. But Kieran wasn't thinking about the future right now. He was thinking about survival. And if survival meant bending the truth, even breaking it entirely, then that was what he would do. The moment the communication channels opened, the leaders of the galactic factions would come, and they would demand answers. But Kieran knew what they didn't. They would be walking into a trap they wouldn't even know existed until it was too late. By the time Serafina returned, her expression unreadable, the pieces of the puzzle were in place. The stage was set, and humanity was about to play the most dangerous game it had ever known. Kieran met her gaze, his eyes steady. He didn't need to say a word. They both understood the gravity of what came next. "Ready?" she asked. "As ready as we'll ever be," Kieran replied. "Let's make them believe we're their salvation or their doom." The plan was in motion. The fleets were on their way. And as Kieran looked out toward the dark expanse of space, he couldn't help but wonder, would they fall to their knees begging for the cure? Or would humanity rise from the ashes, a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen? The air in the command center was thick with anticipation, the low hum of the ship's engines vibrating under Kieran's boots as he stared at the glowing map of the galaxy before him. The fleets were closing in, an unrelenting force of ships, each one carrying the weight of the galaxy's most powerful factions, all bent on Earth's destruction or subjugation. The plan had been set in motion. Now, all Kieran had to do was wait. The final negotiation, the meeting that would decide Earth's fate, was just hours away. But even now, as the countdown ticked down in his mind, a chill gnawed at him. He had no illusions about what was coming. The galaxy was not here to discuss terms. It was here to take. They were coming for Earth's secret, the key to humanity's immunity, the one thing they thought would guarantee control. What they didn't understand was that Earth was no longer the weak, vulnerable planet they had once dismissed. Earth had become the power, and Kieran Voss had become the reluctant embodiment of that power. Serafina's voice crackled over the comm, breaking through the heavy silence. "Kieran, they're arriving." His hands clenched around the edge of the console. The galaxy's forces had finally made their move. He didn't need to look up to know what that meant. Thousands of ships, armed to the teeth, had appeared in Earth's orbit, their dark silhouettes blotting out the stars like harbingers of doom. They were here, but they were not prepared for what they would face. He felt Serafina before he saw her, the steady presence of her approach signaling the end of their preparations. She stepped into the command center, her dark eyes sharp with determination. But there was something else in her gaze, a quiet understanding. This was the point of no return. Earth's future, humanity's place in the galaxy, rested in their hands. "They're ready," she said, her voice steady, but laced with an unspoken weight. "All of them. They want the data, Kieran. They want it now." Kieran stood silent for a moment, his mind racing as he weighed the reality of the moment. They had led the galaxy's forces into believing Earth was capable of something they couldn't even begin to comprehend. But now, the time had come. The bluff was no longer a game. If they were to survive, they had to prove that humanity's strength was not just in their resistance to the virus, but in their ability to adapt, to fight, and to outthink every opponent they faced. "We'll give them the cure," Kieran said softly, his eyes meeting Serafina's. "But not in the way they expect. This is humanity's weapon now. We're not here to play their game. We're going to show them that we're not their pawns. Not anymore." Serafina's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. She knew what Kieran was talking about. The data they had fed the galaxy had been enough to stir their paranoia, enough to make them believe that humanity was sitting on the edge of an unstoppable force. But the truth was that the virus was never about the cure. It was about control, and Earth was about to take that control. "We need to prepare for their arrival," Kieran continued, turning to face the screen. His fingers moved quickly over the console, locking in the final details of the plan. "When they arrive, we'll take control of the conversation. We'll show them we've unlocked something they'll never understand, and then we'll offer them a choice." Serafina stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "What kind of choice?" "The kind of choice they never wanted us to have," Kieran replied, his voice cold and firm. "We'll show them the virus. No, we'll show them our immunity, and let them decide. Do they want us to fight, or do they want us to join them?" Do they want to survive, or do they want to perish at our hands? There was a moment of silence, and then Serafina nodded. Then let's make sure they understand what they're walking into. This is humanity's chance to rewrite the rules. The time had come. The doors to the command center slid open, and Kieran felt the weight of the decision press down on him. This wasn't just about saving Earth. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity would no longer be dismissed. They had seen their worth, their resilience in the face of impossible odds. But they had yet to see the true power of humanity, the ability to survive, to adapt, to rise from the ashes of their struggles and prove that they were not just another species to be used or discarded. They were the ones who would determine their own fate. The grand hall where the meeting would take place was massive, an expanse of cold marble and steel towering above them as alien leaders from every corner of the galaxy took their seats. Kieran stood at the front, his posture straight, his eyes unyielding as the room filled with the whispers of the galaxy's most powerful leaders. Counselor Thalos, the figure who had once sought to undermine humanity's role, stood at the forefront of the room, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed Kieran. "Dr. Voss," he said, his voice heavy with distrust, "we are here for one reason only, to obtain the cure that Earth has been hiding. We will not tolerate any further delay." Kieran didn't flinch. "You want the cure?" he asked, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. "Then you'll have to listen to what I have to say first." Thalos's eyes flickered with annoyance, but Kieran continued. "The virus you fear, the one you believe Earth has controlled. Let me make it clear. Humanity has not controlled it. We have survived it. Not through luck, not through some accident. We survived because we are stronger than you think. Our immunity is not a gift. It is a testament to our resilience." Kieran's voice grew stronger, the weight of his words striking the room like a thunderclap. "We didn't just survive the virus. We survived the chaos, the wars, the impossible odds. We endured, not because we were immune to death, but because we never gave up. We are not weak, Counselor Thalos. We are human." The silence in the room was deafening as the alien leaders absorbed his words, their gazes flickering between Kieran and each other. It wasn't fear in their eyes. It was something deeper, something more dangerous. And for the first time, Kieran saw what he had been hoping for. They weren't just listening. They were starting to understand. Kieran stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Thalos. "You want the cure? We will give it to you, but not by bending to your will, not by giving up what makes us human. You've underestimated us. You've seen us as nothing more than a footnote in the galaxy's history. But that ends now." Thalos opened his mouth, but no words came out. He had no response. There was nothing left to say. The galaxy's most powerful factions had come here thinking they could take what they wanted. But Kieran knew something they didn't. Humanity was no longer the prey. They were the hunters. "We'll offer you the cure," Kieran continued, his voice resolute. "But you will not dictate the terms of our future. Humanity is not here to bow. We are here to lead." The finality in his words reverberated through the chamber, and as the silence stretched into eternity, Kieran knew it was over. The galaxy would not forget this moment. It was a turning point, not just for Earth, but for all of civilization. The galaxy's rulers had come here expecting to crush humanity beneath their heel. But in the end, it was humanity that had become the power. The virus had not broken them. It had made them stronger. And now it was the galaxy's turn to learn that the most powerful force in the universe was not the weapon. It was the will to survive. Kieran turned his gaze toward the stars outside the meeting hall, his heart pounding with a new understanding. Humanity had not just survived. They had transcended. "We've only just begun to show them what we can do," Kieran said, his voice firm with the promise of the future. And for the first time in his life, Kieran Voss truly believed it.